The myth of conscious choice. Did you really choose what you ate today? Or did you just repeat what you always do? We love to believe we're in control, that every decision we make, from breakfast to what we watch before bed, is the result of a rational, free, conscious choice. But what if most of those decisions were pretty much made before we even thought about them? Picture this. You wake up, stretch, walk to the bathroom, and brush your teeth. At what point did you decide to brush your teeth? Chances are there wasn't a formal thought process like, now, rationally, I'll brush my teeth because it's good for my dental hygiene. You just did it. Same thing when you grab your phone the moment you wake up. Open that same app, check the notifications, scroll for minutes or hours, without even noticing. These actions aren't accidents. They're habits, shaped by repetition, environment, outside triggers. And a lot of the time, they don't even go through conscious awareness. According to cognitive psychology and neuroscience, over 90% of the decisions we make every day are automatic, fast, almost reflex-like. They don't come from deep reasoning. They come from mental patterns that are already built in. Empiricist philosophy, especially thinkers like David Hume, warned us long ago. Our mind is far more influenced by patterns of past experiences than by pure logic. We choose based on habit, not reason. And that completely clashes with the idealized idea that we're always rational and free agents. So if we're running on autopilot, if even what we eat or do right after waking up is already preloaded, then who's really in control? In the next chapter, we'll explore that mystery. If we're not the ones consciously choosing, then who or what is making the decisions for us? The myth of conscious choice. Did you really choose what you ate today? Or did you just repeat the usual? We love to believe we're in control, that each of our decisions, from breakfast to what we watch before bed, is the result of a rational, free, conscious choice. But what if most of these decisions were practically made before we even thought about them? Imagine this scene. You wake up, stretch, walk to the bathroom, and brush your teeth. At what point did you decide to brush your teeth? There was probably no formal deliberation like, now rationally I'm going to brush my teeth because it's good for my oral health. You simply did it. The same goes for when you grab your phone as soon as you wake up. Open that same old app, check your notifications, scroll for minutes or hours, without even noticing. These actions aren't accidents. They're habits shaped by repetition, context, external stimuli, and often don't even pass through the filter of full awareness. According to cognitive psychology and neuroscience studies, over 90% of our daily decisions are automatic, quick, almost reflexive. They don't emerge from deep reasoning but from previously consolidated mental patterns. Empiricist philosophy, especially from authors like David Hume, has already warned us. Our mind is far more influenced by associations of past experiences than by pure logic. We choose based on custom, not on reason. And this clashes with the idealized view that we're always rational and free agents. If we're acting in automatic mode, if even what we eat or do upon waking is already pre-installed, then who's really in control? In the next chapter, we'll explore this riddle. If we're not consciously choosing, who or what is deciding for us? The real director of the scene. If you're not the scriptwriter of your life, have you become just an actor reciting lines you never wrote? In the previous chapter, we saw that many of our actions are automatic. But this raises an even more unsettling question. If we're not the ones consciously choosing, then who is writing the script? The answer isn't simple, and it might not even be a who, but rather a set of influences operating behind the scenes. Let's start with a curious experiment. In an office, researchers placed candies in transparent jars on a table. The result? People ate far more candy than when the sweets were kept in opaque jars or drawers. No one consciously decided to eat more candy, but the visual exposure increased their impulse. The environment decided for them. This is just one example of how external and internal factors shape our behavior. Deep-rooted habits, like always pushing the same elevator button, even if it's already lit. Culture and social norms, like wearing certain clothes to look professional. Emotional conditioning, like avoiding difficult conversations because we learned that conflict is dangerous. Invisible rewards, like checking notifications because our brain craves dopamine. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, calls this System 1, a mode of thinking that's quick, automatic, and instinctive. System 2, slower and more rational, appears less often, and ironically usually believes it's in charge. And rationalist philosophy? It taught us to trust reason as life's guide. Yet here's the shock. Even the most rational thinkers, like Descartes, can't escape the influences of the body, the environment, and emotion. Yes, we're rational beings, but in an animal body, immersed in society. So if our acts are shaped by invisible forces, habits, emotions, environment, does that mean we're condemned to autopilot? No. But it does mean that to take the reins, we first need to identify who's directing the scene. That's where reason comes in, not as the tyrant of emotions, but as a light that reveals what was once in the dark. In the next chapter, we'll see how reason can be our ally in reprogramming the automatic, without denying our human nature. Reason as a routine hacker. What if you could reprogram your habits the way you update your phone's operating system? So far, we've seen that our choices aren't as free as we think, but that's not a reason to give up. It's an invitation to be strategic. If our behaviors follow patterns, we can learn to decode and redesign those patterns. And that's exactly where reason comes into play, not as a distant queen, but as a hacker's tool, practical, creative, and daring. Let's talk about habits. They function like mental codes following a simple sequence: trigger, routine, reward. Understanding this gives us power. Reason can be used to modify any one of these elements. One concrete example is the habit stacking technique, popularized by James Clear in Atomic Habits. It works like this. You stack a new habit on top of an existing one. For instance, after I brush my teeth, automatic habit, I'll do 1 minute of mindful breathing. New habit. Simple, direct, effective. Another powerful rational tool is the decision journal. Over a few days, you note down your important choices and the context in which they occurred. This helps you see patterns. I always eat junk food when I'm tired. I always put things off when I start my day on my phone. That awareness is the first step toward changing the code. Here's where empiricism and rationalism intersect. Empiricism teaches us to observe experience and gather real-world data, including our own behaviors. Rationalism provides the tools to interpret that data and plan deliberate changes. And it all starts small. The philosopher Spinoza said that freedom isn't the absence of cause, but the knowledge of the causes that move us. In other words, the more we understand why we do something, the freer we become to do it differently. Yes, it's possible to hack your routine, but even the best code needs a proper environment to run. If we remain surrounded by the same stimuli, distractions, and triggers, reason becomes a swimmer against the current. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to design environments that favor conscious decisions, rather than relying solely on willpower. The environment as invisible code. Have you noticed you eat more when you're watching TV? Or that you work better in certain cafes than at home? The environment isn't neutral, it programs our behavior. For a long time, we believed that sheer willpower was enough to make a change. But modern science and philosophy say otherwise. The rational mind is highly sensitive to the environment it's in. In other words, it's not just about deciding. You also have to create the right conditions for good decisions to flourish. Take the classic example of apples versus chocolates. In cafeterias where fruit was placed at eye level and sweets were stashed away, fruit consumption rose dramatically without needing to rationally convince anyone to eat healthier. This is called choice architecture, a concept championed by Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize in Economics, and Cass Sunstein, showing how small changes in the environment can nudge people toward healthier, more ethical, or more productive behaviors. It works because the environment sends us constant signals, even when we're not aware. The position of objects, phone notifications, lighting in a room, how a desk is organized, all of it influences whether you'll pick up a book or open Instagram. And it's not weakness, it's design. Want to work better? Leave your phone in another room. Want to eat fewer snacks? Don't buy them in the first place. Want to meditate more? Keep your mat in plain sight. It might sound obvious, but the obvious still has to be built. Even philosophers like John Locke, a classic empiricist, recognize that the mind is shaped early on by external experiences. The mind is a blank slate, he said, and it's the world that writes on it. If we want to write something new, we need to change the pen, the ink, and even the environment where that slate resides. Modifying the environment isn't cheating, it's wisdom. It's using the world to work for us, not against us. But not everything is external. We also need to deal with the internal voices that sabotage our best intentions. In the next chapter, we'll tackle self-deception, rationalizations, and mental shortcuts that pull us away from genuine awareness. Sometimes the enemy lies within, the traps of consciousness. Have you noticed how we always have a good excuse for everything? And worse yet, we often believe them ourselves. You decide not to exercise today because you're tired. You postpone a project because it's not the right time. You overspend but say it was a well-deserved reward. What's odd is that it all seems logical in that moment. But is it really? Consciousness, that voice that supposedly guides us with clarity, can also be a poor storyteller. It justifies impulses, rationalizes laziness, creates arguments to reinforce what we already want to do. It's the famous self-deception, and no one is immune. Philosophy has warned us about this. Nietzsche said that reason is often used not to seek truth, but to confirm our instinctual desires. In other words, we think after we want, not before. Emotion makes the decision and reason simply crafts a pretty narrative to match. Modern psychology agrees. Confirmation bias. We look for information that reinforces what we already believe. Cognitive dissonance. When we act against our values, we change the values, not the action. Automatic rationalizations. We develop arguments after we decide, then believe those arguments were the true cause. That's why falling into internal traps is so easy. The danger isn't making mistakes. It's believing we're right when we're really just comfortable. But there's a way out. Reason can be used against its own tricks. The key is metacognition, thinking about our own thinking, questioning our certainties, writing down the reason for a decision and reading it back days later more objectively, asking for feedback from people who disagree with us. Uncomfortable? Very. But as Kant said, emerging from intellectual immaturity requires courage to think for yourself. If we want a more genuine freedom and not just an illusory one, we need to face head-on the internal mechanisms that deceive us. Reason isn't just about making good arguments, it's having the courage to dismantle our own narratives. In the next chapter, we'll bring together everything we've seen so far and propose a practical path. How to cultivate active awareness amid routines, pressures, and all the noise of the world. Active awareness, freedom in motion. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's knowing why you want what you do. After everything we've covered, the daily automatisms, the invisible backstage of the environment, the inner traps of the mind, there's an inevitable question. Is there a way out? Can we live more consciously without becoming digital monks or productivity robots? The answer is yes, but it's not found in a magic formula. It's a lifestyle, the continuous practice of active awareness. Development. Active awareness is the exercise of putting reason into motion, even in the midst of a chaotic routine. It's not necessarily about stopping everything to meditate for 2 hours, though that can help, but about creating microspaces of clarity. Here are 3 simple and powerful practices. Micro pauses of perception. 3 times a day, pause for 1 minute. Notice what you're feeling, thinking, and doing. No judgment, just observe. This trains the mind to step out of autopilot. Dialogue with the habit. When you catch yourself in a repetitive behavior, picking up your phone, eating something, procrastinating, ask, what do I really want right now? The very act of asking already slows down the impulse. Intentional environment. Each week, adjust one aspect of your surroundings to make good choices easier. Remove apps from your home screen, place books in plain sight, leave notes in strategic locations. Is this taking me closer or further from who I want to be? These actions may seem small, but they have a domino effect. As Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Cultivating attention, decision, and intention changes who you are and who you're becoming. True freedom isn't the absence of influence, it's being aware of it. It isn't absolute control, it's steering with presence. It isn't perfection, it's practice. You won't wake up tomorrow 100% conscious, but you can choose right now to take the first step. Rationality isn't coldness, it's the courage to see clearly. If this content made you think, imagine the impact it could have on others. Share it with someone who lives on autopilot and could use a rational wake-up call. Subscribe so you won't miss the upcoming chapters uniting philosophy and real life. And of course, leave your like. It shows that this kind of reflection is worth continuing.